All right, everybody. So I have been on such an odyssey, not just with my cycling, but with my camera gear. You know, for years I have tried to do video and I always came up against the same two issues. It was shaky footage and bad sound. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago, it was just before I started my tour in Mexico, that the Removu K1 came out, and it finally gave me all the features that I wanted in a video camera to help tell my story. And I started a YouTube channel before I knew anything about video or video editing, but I felt like, you know what, I have the story and now I have the tool to tell that story. I'll figure the rest of it out. And if you followed my videos through Mexico and then through Colombia, then, you know, this primarily the video was taken with the Removu K1. And, you know, I've always been pretty clear about my story. I am an older woman traveling alone around the world on a recumbent tricycle. And one thing that was really important to me from a video camera is that I be able to show the unique perspective of riding a recumbent tricycle. And so I really wanted a camera that I could hand hold while I was cycling. And the Removu K1 gave this to me. And then in Colombia, disaster struck. I was on a boating trip and I fell in the ocean, totally random, and my Removu K1 and another camera were destroyed. And I knew at the time I would not be able to replace it in Colombia. I would have to wait until I returned to the United States. But I decided to look around in Cartagena, which is a beautiful touristic city, really a photographer's paradise, and see if I could find something to make do. And what I found was the GoPro Hero 7 Black, and I was pretty excited to find this camera. I had read a lot of really wonderful reviews, particularly about the image stabilization, and it really does have fantastic image stabilization, and I really enjoyed using this camera. It's got some really fun features. For instance, you can control almost everything on this camera with your voice, and it's got another feature called time warp, where it speeds up the footage and it processes it so that it's ready to use in whatever video editing software you want. And then you get this really fast footage from, you know, maybe a stretch where it's not that interesting, but you want to show the passage of time. But what I couldn't find is any kind of mounts or accessories. And this camera is really not designed to be used just like this. It's designed to be used in mounts, and there are mounts for everything. There's mounts to use it jumping out of an airplane or on a surfboard, for hiking, on skateboards, on a pole, on a stick. There's mounts to put it on your drone. There's even mounts to put it on your dog. But it really is designed to be used with mounts, and I couldn't find anything. I found a couple things in my bags. I had tripod foot for a monopod, and then I also had for a selfie stick to put my smartphone, and so I put those two together, and then I was able to get more control over the camera, and it actually worked pretty well. The other thing that this camera is lacking is an external mic jack. And the only way you can use an external mic with this camera is with a proprietary GoPro-made external mic adapter. And I could not find that anywhere in Colombia. In fact, I couldn't even find it when I returned to the United States. It is back ordered. It is still on back order. It's back ordered through GoPro, Amazon, Cometa, Adorama, B&H, Best Buy. I kept making calls, looking at different websites, and I finally found one at an obscure small camera shop. They just happened to have one, and so I managed to pick one up. And this is what you need to add an external mic to the GoPro. And this is what it looks like when you connect it to the GoPro, like so. I mean, how ridiculous is this? And then I've got a stubby with a dead cat on it. I mean, is this just like the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen? Like, what is GoPro thinking? This is $50, this adapter, just to be able to get decent sound. Now, luckily, there are tons of companies that make accessories and mounts for the GoPro. And I found a cage for the GoPro, and it has a little bottom part. You can see there's a space, and that's for the microphone adapter. And the GoPro fits in it. This is made by a company called Ulanzi, and it's a pretty cool cage that they've come up with. It has a back plate to hold it in place, like so. And then you feed the adapter through it, like so. And then kind of twist it around. And it fits into the USB-C port, and that's the port that you also use to charge the GoPro. And so when you're using an external microphone, you cannot you cannot charge the camera, the battery, and you can use an external battery pack, which I have in my bag. So whenever I wasn't using the camera, I would unplug this and plug in my external battery pack to keep the battery charged up. Because otherwise you're going to go through a lot of batteries. This camera is so small, the batteries are also really small. Now, this is what it ends up looking like, and I think this is a super cool, sweet vlogging setup. You know what? This is something that I really will enjoy using. I've added a shorty stick. This is made by GoPro just for a handle, and it extends. It's kind of a cool feature. And it also opens up into tripod feet, so you can set it down anywhere. So when all is said and done, I probably have about $600 in this camera now. But it's a pretty sweet, I think it's a pretty sweet vlogging setup, and I think it looks really cool. So after I got this whole thing set up, a crazy thing happened. I heard from Removu, the maker of my favorite camera. They sent me a replacement. So now I have two cameras that both have excellent image stabilization. The Removu K1 and the GoPro achieve image stabilization in completely two different ways. The GoPro does it electronically, it's internal, and the Removu K1 does it through a gimbal. So you can see this top part. So this swivels, and then this part swivels, and this round ball in the front is actually the camera. And you can see that it moves up and down. This part moves side to side, and then this part moves side to side, giving the camera 3-axis image stabilization. And I thought I would just kind of go through this camera a little bit because I don't think most people are familiar with it. It's a smaller company, doesn't have the budget that certainly that GoPro has. And I'll start at the bottom. There's a 1/4-inch thread for, you can use a tripod. There's a little button here that you push, and it gives you the battery indicator. So I have 3/4 battery. The battery comes out like so. It'll last for 4 hours, and there's no battery charger. There's just a micro USB port. You can use an external battery pack or plug it into a wall. And let me turn it on. And when I turn it on, pay close attention to what happens with the camera. This round part here is actually the camera. So I'm going to turn it on with this side button. And you can see it's almost like it comes to attention, it comes alive. And now the camera is completely stable with the horizon. And this is something that a gimbal will give you, that a camera like this, even though it has really good image stabilization, you know, you have to hold it steady. Otherwise, you're going to get your horizon is going to be moving with however you move the camera. With this one, the horizon is always straight. And so there's a toggle switch in the front, and if I push it once, it puts it in follow mode. So now, no matter where I move the handle, the camera will follow. So I'm going to move it up, to the left, and to the right. But you'll see that the camera is always even with the horizon. If I hit it again, it goes into pan mode. So now, no matter where I put the handle, the camera remains stationary. So I can go to the left, I can go to the right, and the camera stays in the same spot. If I hit it twice, it recenters the camera, and if I hit it 3 times, it puts it into selfie mode. And one of the most handy features about this camera is it has a front-facing screen. It's really small, so you can't see a lot of detail, but you can always frame your shot, and you can always see what it is that you want in the shot. And this is particularly helpful when I use it in selfie mode, which is what I used while I was cycling and I was talking into the camera. Because the lens is much closer to me, I'm filling up more of the screen. It's really nice to be able to be framed within the shot. And with this, I can see where I am and, just make simple adjustments while I'm filming. And this is a 17mm lens, so it's very wide. And you can see I don't even have it very far away, and I'm not taking up the whole screen. I have to have the camera like this close to fill up the screen. And if I can hold it out this far, and I'm going to get a lot more of the background. So that's a pretty cool feature. And then there's also a joystick, which will move the camera up and down and left and right. And again, you hit the toggle twice and it will center the camera. And the controls on here couldn't be any simpler. There's one button to take video and there's one button to take photos. I wouldn't really reach for either one of these to take photos, but if it's what you have in your hand, it will take a photo. It takes 12 megapixel JPEGs. In video mode, it will take 4K 30 and 24. In 1080 high definition, it will take 120, 60, 30, and 24 frames per second. It also has time-lapse mode, and it has a really fun feature where you first set how long you want your time lapse, and then you can also set points A and B, and through the time of your time lapse, it will pan from point A to point B, and you can only get that on with a camera that has a gimbal. This is Removu's first camera, and with this camera, you have image stabilization, you have an external mic jack, you have a front-facing screen, and you have a 4-hour battery. This is pretty amazing. This camera on B&H is $280. With GoPro, this is their 7th iteration, and they finally have decent image stabilization, but they still don't have an external mic jack, they don't have a front-facing screen, and the camera is so small, the battery life is never going to be very good. You can't really compare these two cameras because they're really designed for two different things. The GoPro is waterproof. This camera really is not. The GoPro is meant to just throw in your bag. You can be rough with it. Whereas the Removu is more like a traditional camera and you need to take better care of it. And now that I have two cameras that have great image stabilization, I want to go outside and see what the difference is. See if we can tell a difference between a camera that uses the internal electronic image stabilization like the GoPro has, or the gimbal mechanical image stabilization of the Removu K1. All right, so let's go outside. Okay, so I'm in my neighborhood walking. I've got the GoPro here in my left hand, the K1 in my right, and I'm just gonna walk just a little ways. In order to use the image stabilization on the GoPro, I have to put it's called Hyper Smooth, and it doesn't work at 4K 30, and so I've dropped it down to 2.7K 30 frames per second, and on the K1 it's 4K 30 frames per second. I doubt you'll see any difference. I'm also using the internal microphones on both cameras. It's a beautiful day. It's pretty isolated where I am, so I doubt you'll hear any wind noise. But one of the biggest tests for image stabilization is climbing stairs. You've got forward movement as well as up and down. And oftentimes what you'll see is, you know, just kind of a wobbling. And I really don't have a problem with this because after all, I am walking upstairs, I'm not floating upstairs. So having some movement really is okay. I've come up to the top of the stairs. The stairway just goes from one street to another, city stairs. And then I'm going to turn around and go back down. But what I want to eliminate is jerkiness, that shaky footage that is distracting to the story that we're trying to tell. As long as the movement is smooth, it really should be okay. Okay, so that concludes my test of the image stabilization on the two cameras, the mechanical gimbal on the Removu K1, and the internal image stabilization, the Hyper Smooth on the GoPro Hero 7 Black. What did you think? Did you see any differences? Was there anything objectionable? I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment in the comment section below. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching.